clair, obscur, troupe de ratures, trouvera effet. Clair, obscur, bordé aux peintures, trouvera sans aide.
Let's be clear about why Clair Obscur sits on a gilded throne made of game awards. It's not because it reinvented the wheel, it's because the rest of the industry is busy reinventing the same 3 tire treads and wondering why everyone is complaining about the ride being so fucking boring. Outside of being a French-Japanese fusion RPG full of English accents, Clair Obscur is essentially the plot of Final Fantasy X, the UI of Persona 5, and the combat of Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door. None of this is damning. It's curation. It's the gaming equivalent of a chef who knows you love truffle fries and just gives you the damn truffle fries. AAA publishers convinced themselves years ago that people only want certain types of game, not games, not variety, not creativity. Just one game. The ideal forever game that you can't quit because you've already bought the season pass and your friends are still playing it. Genres were pared back by shareholders who think engagement is measured in daily logins, not in the memory of staying up until 3 a.m. because you had to find out what happens next. This rejection of creativity is why the industry is now a monoculture, a Monsanto cornfield of identical experiences. Every major publisher releases their own PvPvE extraction looter shooter, or a hero-based arena shooter, or a loot-based live service RPG, each one more desperate to be a forever game than the last. Like a clingy ex who won't accept that sometimes people just want a weekend fling with a story that has an ending. Eventually, a developer gets bored of stirring the live service slop trough. They remember what it felt like before they designed every game to be a second job with worse benefits. And then we get a turn-based RPG that remembers fantasy world should be fantastical, not simply overly large multiplayer maps. The characters relatable, not licensed IP from other entertainment, and soundtrack should make your hair stand on end, not side characters filling dead air with sarcastic objective hints. They dug up treasure players never buried and said, "See, you still love this. No one ever said we didn't." So where did this delusion originate from? From the real non-player characters, the MBAs who have never finished a game in their lives, but have definitely finished a quarterly earnings report. It takes just one Fortnite, one Genshin Impact printing money via Skinner box mechanics and FOMO to convince the suits it's the only recipe. They saw their slot machines work and cancelled or mutilated everything else. Games haven't been this boring since the video game crash of the 80s, but the current industry is probably safe from another Atari-style disaster. That required uniformity of limitation. Hardware couldn't do much more, and there were no quality controls. Today, we suffer from uniformity of ambition. Everyone chasing the same damn whale wallet. The crash won't be the industry, but of faith. It's a quiet moment when you stare at the $70 price tag of yet another extraction shooter with a $30 year one pass, and you're suddenly overwhelmed by the pristine, unmonetized memory of when games made you feel something other than a brief dopamine rush for finishing a multiplayer match with marginally better performance on the scoreboard and being rewarded with your custom character performing a TikTok dance. Of when you would play a game, enjoy it, put it away, and then play a completely different game and enjoy that too. It's not that Clair Obscur is that good, it's that the industry is that sick. Here's something the industry forgot while they were busy motion capturing every nostril flare on a Hollywood actor's face. Music used to be the voice of the game. Back when we only had 24 pixels and mode 7 for visuals, soundtracks had to carry the entire emotional weight. You didn't need a fully voiced monologue to know a theme meant sadness or that you were about to get your ass kicked when One Winged Angel dropped. But now that we have enough storage space to fully voice every NPC's existential crisis when the main character shoulder checks them on the street, it's been pared back like everything else. Another unnecessary expense when you've already got celebrity voice actors. So when a game like Clair Obscur puts its soundtrack front and center, and that soundtrack comes from someone who's never worked professionally in the industry, you better believe I'm heralding that. That's remembering what games used to understand instinctively. Music isn't background noise, and voice acting and music aren't competitors, they're partners. I don't think I've ever played a single game set in France where the characters actually speak with French accents. It's always pristine BBC documentary English. They're standing in front of the Eiffel Tower equivalent, surrounded by architecture that screams "Oui oui baguette," and everyone sounds like they're about to discuss a Jane Austen novel. When everything looks this French, when the game practically comes with a cigarette and beret, would it have killed them to let the voices match? Clair Obscur is unapologetically French in every way except the one that comes out of people's mouths. The reason Clair Obscur resonated with so many people is because it's about 30-somethings feeling like their life is over. That's the whole hook once you remove the fantasy trappings. The game's central conceit, that you die when the paintress calls your age, hits different when you're staring down the barrel of your 30s wondering when you're supposed to feel like an actual adult. You're not a bright-eyed and horned-up teenager who naively believes they can change the world for the better anymore. You're a millennial and in this case, French. The game doesn't need to explain why watching your number come up feels like doom. Every birthday after 30 feels less like a celebration and more like a countdown timer you can't disable. No wonder we're all buying this game. It's therapy we can actually afford.
You look tense. I know what you need. A little jewel. Come on, it'll loosen you up. You can't go and see Sophie all somber and tense.
Your ex-girlfriend, who you haven't seen in 4 years, is about to die today along with a lot of other people. To help you lighten up, would you care for some one-on-one combat with deadly weapons? Normally the French would just have a drink and a smoke. Combat is classic turn-based instead of the more action-focused combat we've seen in more recent RPGs. However, that's not entirely true. because you're going to be hitting the buttons a lot during your own turn and during your enemies. During your turn, you have action points you can spend to shoot weak attacks at enemies that are useful for targeting weak points or destroying shields, and then selecting from special skills that often require on-screen button prompts to maximize them. And during enemy turns, you're going to be dodging, jumping, parrying, and countering. It takes menu-based role-playing games and makes it into something that could be considered an Olympic sport, because the timing window on some counters and attacks is so small, you need to analyze them in the Large Hadron Collider to time the exact moment to press X. I love the concept. Every year, the age limit of life gets subtracted by 1. That should be reshaping civilization. But then you look at how society actually functions, and nobody seems to have gotten the memo. Would Gustav really remain single for 4 years after his relationship with Sophia ended? The man is going to die next year. This isn't taking time to heal territory. This is every day I waste is 0.3% of my remaining lifespan. Everyone would be speedrunning relationships. And why is anyone having children? A child born this year gets to live for 16 years. And that shrinks even further every subsequent year. That's not a life. That's an extended tutorial level. Society should be an absolute freefall, just pure hedonistic, we're all going to die so let's live chaos. Or conversely, complete totalitarian control trying to hold it together. Instead, we get the world's most polite apocalypse.
How about showing me a dance of love and sorrow?
You're minutes away from non-existence. Would you care to spend some of your final moments dueling your ex-boyfriend to inspire my painting?
I wanted to see you wearing it.
Did Gustav change his entire outfit right there on the street in public? If they're that cool with public nudity, the game shouldn't have to cut to black. Claire Obscur is Final Fantasy X with a liberal arts degree and a Sephora addiction. You've got a giant mysterious entity slowly killing off humanity and no one knows why. Sin/the Paintress. Humans send a group of volunteers every year to try to discover more about what's going on and to stop it. Pilgrimage/expeditions. And meanwhile, the Gommage serves as this beautiful ritualistic final moment for the dying. Essentially the same as the Sending, but French. Important characters like Sophie get Gommage lag so they can have a more drawn-out final moment while everyone else evaporates in seconds. When the French can't rely on another country to do all the heavy lifting while they sit back and criticize the execution, they're forced to actually do something themselves, and they set about doing it in the most inefficient, over-romanticized way humanly possible. Every year, an expedition is sent out to discover more about the Paintress in hopes of defeating her and saving humanity from extinction. 1 expedition per year. The human race is facing extinction, and they can only be bothered to mount a scouting expedition once every 12 months. Not continuous efforts, not multiple simultaneous teams, not throw everything we have into this problem because we're all going to die. And naturally, because this is the most French solution possible, there are no supply lines to support them, no infrastructure, no reserves, and no way to send information back if they actually discover something useful. So they've all died. Every single one. That's 70 years of sending people to their deaths. They're no closer to stopping the Painters than they were at Expedition 0.
What is Illumina?
Abilities you internalize by using a Pictos in battle after enough times.
Well, that explains it. Pretty par of the course for French technology.
It's a good strategy in tracing their steps. They're the only expedition with any survivors, and they made it to the monolith, so...
The only expedition to make it to the monolith and return with survivors was the first expedition, Expedition 0. And no one thought of retracing their steps until Loon 70 years on.
Alright, enough chit-chat. Come on, old man, let's have a duel.
Your old girlfriend and several of your friends died just a few hours ago, and we're about to venture into certain death. Care for another duel? I figured with their level of technology they should have planes or dirigibles, something a bit more efficient than a sailboat.
Thanks to you. Expedition 33.
Madame et Messieurs, nous avons un titre. They don't get any further than a few steps ashore before an old man appears and starts killing them where they stand. Maëlle is saved by some unknown person, while Gustav is attacked by a giant hand monster and survives with no explanation, waking up safe and sound while everyone else around him is dead.
You do that. We both die.
Judging by your sitting position, you would only be in the splash zone of Gustav's suicide.
The Lumina converter seems intact. It's about time we test it in real conditions.
The Lumina Converter is Gustav's big invention that no other expedition had access to. It allows the party to... I don't really know. I think it's a bit of a joke about RPG mechanics, or an in-world explanation for why they can have so many passive abilities equipped after learning them from equipment. But Gustav didn't invent that. Final Fantasy IX did.
Someone came here before and set up these handholds.
Probably Expedition 69. The Climbers Expedition.
Some previous expeditions had specific goals other than defeating the Paintress, like building infrastructure for future expeditions, mainly mounting terrible climbing bars everywhere instead of ladders. Though the magic grappling hook targets were a nice thought, they could have taken it a step further and set up supply caches and base camps.
It really does speak.
What do you mean, light?
Are you two reading the subtitles? Because I have no idea how you understood that, Nevron.
There's a message on the wall. Took Maëlle to the weird corals. Head north. Look for a door inside a hut.
They discover a message written on a rock from the person who saved Mael on the beach. He says he took Mael to the weird corals and they can find her inside a hut. In hindsight, it never makes any sense that Verso saved Mael just to hand her back to the team so he could disappear, then later step in and join them and help them take down the paintress. He could have remained with Mael and joined them when they arrived. He's being mysterious here for no real reason. The world map is back, and before anyone in a boardroom starts having a heart attack, it works. This is another one of those things we were told no one wanted anymore. World maps don't work in modern games, they said. Players don't want that anymore, they said. It won't look right with current-gen graphics, they said. They said a lot of things. They were wrong about a lot of things. Shocking, I know. But here's what makes Clair Obscur's world map so genuinely impressive. This thing is layered. Secrets tucked into corners that require exploration to find. Areas that will absolutely destroy you because you wandered too far too early. The game's polite way of saying not yet tourist. Entire story beats you can miss if you don't go looking. And unique bosses hiding in places that reward the curious. It's a world that feels big without making you feel like you need to rely on an objective marker to find your way. And this brings me back to the earlier question. Why do we let an industry convince us that things we genuinely loved, world maps, turn-based combat, and memorable soundtracks, were outdated? Just because graphics got better doesn't mean the foundations were broken. They just needed toying with like everything else. I'm down for fantastical environments and RPGs, but how does flying water work? It's underwater, yet it isn't. They walk while the animals swim. You couldn't play blitzball in a place like this, you know.
How did you end up here?
I don't know. It's all a blur. I remember everyone at the beach. Then I woke up here.
Plot contrivances are always hard to remember. It would have taken the guy a day or more to carry Mael here to this house, and she never woke up during that despite not being injured. All of this hard to believe bullshit just so the identity of the person who saved her wouldn't be given away.
Again. We just trained earlier.
You just reunited with your friends, survivors of a mass murder of all your expedition companions. Fancy a duel before I allow you to leave? The apple doesn't fall far from the tree in this case.
Is that a gestural?
I have to wonder why the only things allowed to speak French in this game are the gestrels who get their ass kicked all the time yet believe they're warriors.
Stop that, you big hairy brush face. Can't you see they're human? Noko's a bit dramatic, but if you're nice, Noko will trade you lots of useful items for chroma. Noko, you silly scruff. Their village is not far from here.
It's hard to believe Mael had time to become this friendly with a gestrel. At the very least, she's only been in flying water for a day after regaining consciousness. And we already know she spent time training with a curator, but somehow she was able to meet the gestrels, go to their village, and then came out to this area and killed a bunch of Nevrons while she was separated from the team. She was just having a great time without a care in the world while she was unaware of the fate of her foster brother Gustave. Mael has strange dreams that resemble stereotypical French cinema. Black and white, confusing narrative, and close-ups in 4:3 screen format. The only thing missing from them is gratuitous nudity. After their expedition was wiped out by just one man in this land full of hostile Nevrons, how did they secure their camp well enough to feel at ease to have hours of conversations with each other while no one is standing watch?
Run. Especially if we meet the man from the beach. We can't face him. You see him, you run.
We're on a mission to defeat the all-powerful paintress, but if you see that old man, run. No chance. This magic allows them to materialize their weapons and musical instruments, and nothing else useful. French logistics at their finest.
They must be gestrels. They're cute, but they're idiots.
Mael demonstrates a traditional British belief about the French.
Guide us to your village, and maybe he'll make you something better.
Wait, what are you?
Trust me. I hate liars.
Mael hates liars, she says, as she lies through her teeth about Gustave building them something cooler than his arm, and she'll be pretty damn forgiving to all of Verso's lies later. Before Gulgra will give them the password to reach Eske, who can take them across the sea. She wants them to prove their strength by fighting in the Gestrel tournament, the final fight of which is against Sael, who rather than search for any survivors or continue the mission she's sworn to, was having the time of her life fighting Gestrels. Gustave is the only person who showed any emotional reaction to the expedition's demise.
You're alive! I thought I was the only one left.
You might have known that sooner had you looked for them. One might complain about the gender imbalance in Clair Obscur. Gustave is the only male party member alongside 3 women. The only other male character is a walking paintbrush who is obsessed with feet. But you have to remember this game is made by French devs, so that was always going to be the case.
How'd you end up here?
Oh, after the beach, I ended up in an odd yellow forest, not too far from here. Had to dodge a few Nevrons, but luckily I met a Gestrel who guided me here.
Somehow ended up in a place very far away from the beach with no explanation whatsoever. Mael is the only person who believably survived the beach.
Now take your friends and go home. Let them spend their final year in peace.
The white-haired man appears inside Mael's indie film dream and tells her that she should go home with her friends and spend their final year in peace. Why didn't you try this approach on the beach? In fact, I'm not even sure why he's so threatened by this expedition. None of them have come even close to defeating the Paintress.
I am very sorry. It's just that Golgra told us that's the password, and
Come on, it's a Gestrel. He'll have forgotten in about a minute.
Give a European someone to look down upon, and they invent racism on the spot.
We really need to cross the sea. Would you please help us?
There's a lot of you to carry. I'm strong, but I'm not that strong. I will need Flory,
Who's Flory?
one of my rocks.
Rocks.
See? Flory helps me swim.
SK is one of the most powerful beings in this world, but he requires stones to use his powers while carrying someone on his back. It doesn't make any sense, and the developers feel pretty smug rubbing it in your face.
let me guess. Francois is located deep in Nevron-infested territory, right?
Oh no. He's right next door.
Unless Gustav played video games before to know overused plot points, you shouldn't be assuming video game cliches about possible missions. This is his first experience with such a request.
You can't just walk into someone's home without knocking. That is incredibly rude.
It's a cave. They don't have doors. The rock Francois had wasn't Flory, so they have to go somewhere else to find the rock, which means Gustav was correct to assume it'd be a Nevron-filled territory. Maëlle once again dreams of her French cinema career, this time of a stranger dying in a fire and her holding a candle along with a crowd. I half expect a red balloon to show up at some point. Claire Obscur is so dedicated to Final Fantasy that it killed off a main cast member, but instead of the lead female, it offs the male lead by stabbing Gustav through the back. Just as the old man is about to strike Maëlle, a new main character shows up who looks and fights similarly to Gustav, but is actually just Clive from Final Fantasy XVI. Verso, having gotten over his crippling main character shyness, follows a team back to camp and hands him Gustav's arm and Lumina converter, guessing correctly that one of them was vitally important.
I'm sorry I couldn't save your friend.
Well, you were able to save Maëlle twice in the nick of time, so I have to question why you were late saving Gustav even once.
I'm wearing an expedition uniform because I, too, am an expeditioner.
What? What do you mean you're an...
I've never seen you before.
First expedition. Expedition 0.
Verso is immortal, just like Renoir, who believes their immortality is a gift from the Paintress, and that should she die, he and his family will die with her, which is his sole reason for killing this expedition. But curiously, he left the other expeditions alone. There was nothing evident at the start of Expedition 33 that made it more threatening than the dozens of others, some of which made it all the way to the monolith, which he didn't intervene in. Verso has to have heart-to-heart moments at camp with the others in order to increase his bond level with them and unlock their limit breaks. I assume Gustav already had a high bond level with all of them since he didn't have this mechanic, but it didn't result in new special moves, so I guess Verso is just better by default.
Who's your brother?
Something like that.
Gustav was Maëlle's legal guardian, but she saw him more like a brother. How ironic that she's now paired up with her real brother.
You want to say something comforting?
Way to spoil the moment by bringing up the stereotype. Normally, you have a symbolic burial when you don't have the body. Gustav's body is back on the cliff. You could easily go and get it instead of burying his arm. They all survived this monster knocking them into a pit of blood. The fall alone would have killed them. Sael and Lune even fell at a different rate from Maëlle and Verso, landing later than the two of them. Sael and Lune have romance options with Verso that happen primarily off-screen, with nothing but some text telling you their growing buddy status. At the very least, you guys could rotate a guard during the night. You did just lose someone important because you were caught unaware.
I will never join you again. There will be a lot of fighting, though. Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's true. There will be a lot of fighting. Exactly. Count me in then.
Every JRPG needs that one character who makes you go, okay Japan, before remembering this game is French and realizing, oh god, they're universal. Monako is the weird member of the party. The blue mage if you want to be traditional. He uses enemy attacks by transforming into enemies that you've beaten and collected the feet of. The guy collects feet. There's a fine line between quirky character trait and someone's DeviantArt account leaking into the design doc.
I know we failed before, but look, you doofus. Don't you recognize her? Of course I do. Then you know what that means. This is our shot. It might be our only shot.
If Maëlle is so important, why didn't you join their expedition back when they reunited with her at the manor? You hung back until Renoir showed up and killed Gustav, which you must have known was going to happen. Monaco knocks a hole in a building so they can get past, but the ground collapses under the party as a result. Somehow they end up split up into two teams in separate locations despite falling from the same place.
They made it surprisingly far. Verso is...
I wish I could look at glowing prisms with no readable words and somehow know what it means. Also, other expeditions use these prism recorders, while this one uses a leather-bound journal to record their journey.
Maëlle's with him.
We need to go.
How do you know Maëlle is with Verso? You all got split up in the fall. They might have been separated from each other as well. Verso disappears during a fight with two swordsman Nevrons, and Maëlle finds it mildly concerning. We're getting a first-hand look at just how detached she is from worrying about her companions when they go missing.
You haven't told her the truth. Have you? son.
Little surprised that a game that is clearly inspired by Final Fantasy X would make the main character's father the villain. Though to be fair, your father destroying the world out of misguided love hits different when the apocalypse is literally about aging and mortality. It's less my dad is evil and more my dad can't process grief like a normal person, so he's taking everyone down with him. At least Final Fantasy X had the decency to make Jack kind of cool with it.
Right, can we talk about this later? I'd really like for you all to survive this.
Yeah, cut out the talking. The soundtrack is about to slap and I'd rather hear that. Renoir casts a huge spell that only manages to kill Monaco's son even though it landed in the middle of the group and Monaco stepped in front of him to take the hit. I'll be honest, I kind of forgot Monaco even had a son and that he was traveling with us. The game already peaked with a party tragedy when it killed Gustave.
Who you are!
I bet that attack was going to do some damage if it can change the film genre into 4:3 grayscale.
We can bring Noko back to life. But not all of Noko will return. It will be a different Noko.
Noko was just a French gremlin. If the new Noko is anything like that, I doubt we'd spot the difference. According to the journals of Expedition 58, through Verso they discovered that the Curator can create a weapon that can pierce the barrier around the Painter's monolith if they collect the chroma from 2 axons. Apparently, Verso used to be much more forthright with his companions. Seriously, how does this technology work? Verso can summon a grand piano. The French will drink anything if you tell them it's wine, including SK's vomit.
I stored my personal stash inside it.
You store wine inside your friend. What kind of fucked up friendship is that? Then again, Verso plays around with Monaco by cutting himself in half as well.
It comes with age.
Do you have apple juice?
The real issue here is that they don't let Maëlle drink. They're French. She'd be drinking, smoking, and having a menage a trois. Also, why stick to drinking laws when very few people will even live to the legal drinking age? Expedition 69 made it to the island made of faces where one of the axons can be found. Even I'm impressed with that level of subtle dirty humor. I almost didn't catch it. Upon breaking the never-before-broken barrier with a rapier the Curator crafted from the chroma of 2 axons, they come across an expedition flag, Expedition 70. Apparently, an earlier expedition of nudists managed to break through the barrier by making JoJo references. I wish that was a joke, but that's how the journal reads. A group of 60-year-old Jim Bro nutcases would have defeated the Paintress long before us, had they not ran out of time and gamaged on her doorstep. The monolith is one of those levels that forces you to retread all the environments you've been through up until this point, while learning about the villain's tragic life as giant phantasms acted out for no reason. It will never be an interesting level. It's too lazy.
We're taking her down.
She's not the only one who grieves. The pain of losing you, she made me inherit it.
I'm sorry you're nothing but a painted creation made to feel despair, but your soundtrack slaps too much for me to do anything but bob my head to it. They even keep Renoir's fight going forever with 3 rounds, just so you can listen to it longer until the Curator shows up and kills Renoir with Maëlle's help. No one is upset that Verso failed to mention that his mother is the Paintress. That's a much bigger deal than hiding that Renoir is his father. Verso had the rock that will allow SK to fly with him on his back this entire time and never used it, instead preferring to wait for a cinematic moment when they would need to fight something huge in the air.
Wanna plant it?
Kept that flag in your back pocket, did you? It's just like an old European power to go planting flags and things after killing the previous owner. Sorry, the game had to switch main characters in the middle of the story due to the actor having prior engagements. Your brother is in a better place now. The MCU, where he can't be snapped out of existence like in this one. Oh. Alicia's letter to Verso reveals the truth of this world, and oh boy is it familiar. In Final Fantasy X, the main character was a dream person in a dream city escaping into reality. Here, reality escaped into a dream world. Titus was from Xenargan, a long-dead city kept alive within the dream of Yu Yevon. Eventually, one of his dream NPCs escaped and destroyed the dream, ending the cycle. In Clair Obscur, the world we've been exploring is the dream. The Paintress escaped into it to grieve for her dead son Verso by delving into his childhood painting and creating a facsimile of her family inside it. Her husband, Renoir, also entered the canvas, but not to grieve. He came to destroy it, to end his wife's delusion. But the Paintress imprisoned him under the monolith because even in her grief, she knew what he'd do. And Verso, like Titus before him, destroys the dream world despite knowing it means the end of everything he ever knew. By destroying the Paintress, he frees a real Renoir, who can now finally destroy the canvas, and the Paintress was holding him back, limiting him to only killing people of a certain age, and painting a number on her monolith to give humanity a warning. Couldn't the Paintress have painted a more poignant message than a number once a year, mere moments before Renoir gomaged another wave of humans, maybe spell out exactly what's happening? Every single human in Lumiere gomages, except for Verso, which doesn't really make any sense. His immortality was given to him by the Paintress, just like the painted Renoir's was. But painted Renoir was gomaged by Maëlle and the Curator, so Verso should gomage with everyone else as well. I mean, even Maëlle gomages. After Mael gamages, we cut to Alicia waking from a dream of Verso dying in a fire before being called downstairs by her sister. Alicia is the youngest daughter of a family of magical painters who can create entire worlds with their paintings. They're in conflict with the writers, who can do the same with words. The writers attacked the family home by setting fire to it, a fire which killed the real Verso and disfigured Alicia. In her grief for Verso, their mother, Aline, entered Verso's childhood painting of Lumiere to be with her own painted family. Her husband Renoir followed after to pull her out since over time she would weaken and die if she remained for too long. Meanwhile, Clea, Alicia's older sister, has been drawing all the Nevrons to help turn the tide in her father's favor. Since humans killed by Nevrons don't send Chroma back to Aline, Clea made one little mistake in her plan, however, since Nevrons only appear on the mainland, so only a small amount of humans on expeditions ever encounter them. In fact, that means if humans stopped sending expeditions, the paintress would have won out over Renoir. Clea instructed her sister Alicia to enter the canvas to help Renoir, but while entering it she lost her composure and Aline's chroma painted over her, so Alicia was reborn in Verso's painting as Mael and grew up there over the years to different parents, never recalling her life outside of the painting until her gommage. But since she's real, only her painted self gommages and Alicia remains. For as much as Mael dreamed of French cinematography, it's kind of weird that she was a painter instead of a director. This makes 2 games now where Shadowheart's hair turns white. The curator was the real Renoir, and Mael had originally hoped that hiding the canvas away before entering it to stop her mother from ever returning would be enough to convince her father not to destroy it and instead restore everything. But he's still adamant on destroying it, since he believes Aline will always find it since it contains a piece of Verso's soul, and Mael herself prefers to stay inside the painting due to how crippled she is outside of it, which she probably should have kept to herself, given her father's attitude toward Aline remaining inside the painting to deal with her grief. Mael stops Verso from gommaging and SK whisks them away. I still have no idea why Verso didn't gommage earlier with everyone else. Back at camp, Mael uses her newly discovered painter's powers to revive Sael and Lune from the chroma she gathered. Death is now meaningless and every one of these people should have an existential crisis. Lune is pissed at Verso for once again betraying them. I would expect a stronger reaction to finding out that you're just a character in a painting and not real.
Can bring them back too. Yeah? Everyone we've lost.
Yeah, but I need chroma and Papa controls all the chroma in the canvas.
No. Not all of it.
Seal asks if Mael can bring back everyone who was gommaged, and she can, but she needs chroma, and Renoir controls all the chroma in the canvas right now, except for the expeditioners who died in Nevrons. Their chroma remained inside their bodies, so Mael can bring them along for a final battle of expeditioner ghosts against the Nevrons Renoir has at his control. For some reason, she doesn't bring Gustave along for the final battle. Maybe she didn't miss him as much as she claimed those 7 or 8 times. Renoir waits at the foot of the Eiffel Tower for Le Boss Final.
Do you really think that I want to destroy this last piece of his soul?
Don't.
Life keeps forcing cruel choices.
The ultimate showdown is just boomers versus their children. You could even say this is a fight over real estate.
As your father, I must look out for you. Especially when you can't look out for yourself.
Do they have grief counseling in the real world? It would solve all of this. Yeah, take another sin off for the soundtrack. Last one. Renoir proves too much and keeps regenerating thanks to the axon behind him. That's when Aline returns to the canvas, something she wasn't supposed to be capable of doing since Alicia hid the canvas before entering it, and distracts it while they assault Renoir one last time. Okay, I lied. I'm taking another sin off for the music again.
This is not a game.
This is not a game, says Game.
I don't want to lose you either. I'm not leaving you forever.
There's another middle ground here. Mael can leave the painting for periods of time and exist in the real world to recover her strength, and then return to the canvas whenever she wants. Instead, they treat this like it's one or the other. Let me see if I've got all this straight. Dream protagonist? Check. Dream reality kept going by grieving figure who can't let go? Check. Father who doesn't understand his children causing the apocalypse? Check. Emotional resolution requiring you to let go of the people you love? I'm assuming check. Through the portal, Verso finds a last remnant of real Verso's soul painting on the canvas. Verso is going to destroy the canvas because he knows Mael lied about returning to the real world and will die here, which he can't allow. The final battle is between a person who wants to live in a fake reality over the real one, and a nihilist who knows he isn't real. This scene would have been more powerful if it were a callback to the start of the game where Mael and Gustave had sparring matches. But Verso is not Gustave despite his fighting style being similar, so it doesn't hit that way. There's two endings depending on who you choose to fight. If you went with Verso, he defeats Mael and kicks her out of the canvas and convinces Verso's soul to stop painting, destroying the canvas and everyone inside it. Meanwhile, the Damar family grieves in the real world and begins to heal. If you go with Mael instead, she chooses to live out her life in the painting, restoring it and everyone who was lost, even Gustav and Sophie. But she also sort of enslaves Verso to do whatever she wants, like play the piano, even though he begged her to unpaint him since he didn't want this life. Enslaving a person isn't uncharacteristic of the French, but it's pretty damn uncharacteristic for Mael at this point. Sorry I made you wait so long for the Expedition 33 video. Hope it was everything you were expecting, and thanks for watching all the way to the end. That helps out way more than any comment or like, but do those too if you did enjoy the video. And be sure to tell me which of these two games you'd like to see sent next. But more importantly, check out my Patreon where you can watch exclusive classic and DLC sim videos you can't find anywhere else. I'm even going to be sending video game movies on it soon. Special thanks to Squirrel, Victoria, Verdictions, Vanilla Pixel, Brainwayne, Chris, Solomon McGuire, Corey Starks, Roman Are You Sleeping, Nervous Nelly, Xavier Distalis, Notorious SKP, Max Headroom, DJ Nelson, Azenith the Succubus, Musical Pumpkin, Castlemania, Zenro, Michelle Z, Dennis O'Brien, Malrose, Jake B, Donald Talbot, Montezuma, Aaron Hines, Sky is Under, Eric Kisser, Shadow Wolf Gaming, Urpel Jaeger, Church Kiones, S. Venus, Mario Neto, Ben Hottie, Biohazard, and Charmsy.